Welcome back to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Rick, how are you?
Awesome. As you can
Good.
see, I'm in the university office today. Students have an exam in a couple of days, and so I'm here holding extra office hours, and voila, here I am.
Awesome. Well, I've been trying to read some book titles in the background there, so this is fun background. I like it.
I probably
Quarter
should have
Michael with. Huh?
curated that a little bit better. Ironically, it's looking a little shabby because I've been trying to get rid of books like crazy. So yeah. In fact, what you might see behind me is the huge paper recycling. So I'm into major office cleaning today, getting rid of stuff.
Nice.
I've
Good luck.
literally already filled this huge paper recycling bin. So it's a little embarrassing, and I'm only like a quarter way through my office.
Feels good though, I bet.
So,
This is the perfect segue to what we want to talk about, Rick. You're shrinking a course as well, from what I understand. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So in our graduate program, we've kind of gone to instead of the traditional 12-week elective courses, we're doing 6-week elective courses, which in a way I really like, but means I have to redesign some courses. And in particular, one course that's really hard to redesign is my course on enterprise risk management. I mean, good golly, I had a hard time stuffing things into 12 weeks. How am I going to curate that for 6 weeks of material? I
Yeah.
mean, come on, that's a 3 year long course.
And like another three-letter acronym starting with an E, everybody has a different interpretation of ERM, right? I'm thinking of ESG, obviously, but I mean,
Actually,
ERM
that
means.
wasn't obvious at all, but I'm glad I was trying to go through, what naughty 3 letter acronyms begin with E, but I guess ESG is a naughty 3 letter
To some, yeah.
Yeah.
um, yeah, ERM means something very different. It means something different to every organization I've worked for. Forget about every person. Um, can I tell you what I think ERM is? Having worked in Canadian credit unions, asset managers, and now a, a large bank in Europe, and you can correct me. Um, what I've seen is ERM is a way of taking all the different financial and non-financial risk types, right? All those different stripes, that risk taxonomy, and combining it all together, putting it in a single currency, whether in terms of capital or revenue or whatever, and passing that information on to senior management, sometimes also the regulator, in a way that's useful, right? So it's like boiling down all the kind of technical stuff that you might see in credit and operational, but making it a single message, often very qualitative, very sort of traffic lights, right? Green, yellow, red, and plain language, and really almost an interpretive function. Is when I was doing it, you were kind of interpreting more technical stuff for senior management, in a way that helps them make decisions. What do you think?
Yeah, you kind of flipped me around there at the end, and you corrected something that I was going to jump on, which is you start off as a measurement of a currency, as a strict quantitative measure. Um, about the only thing I like in COSO, and I'm going back to the older version of COSO actually, uh, was their definition of risk management as being anything that affects the objectives of the organization.
Okay.
And um, you know, every organization, every person for that matter, has a plan. And if everything goes to plan, they will achieve their objectives. But not everything goes to plan, including the plan.
Hmm.
Okay, and that's what enterprise risk management is. It's how do we manage the deviations, remembering that the deviations could be positive or negative. And that's my view of enterprise risk management. Of course, my definition of risk, which we've discussed and debated before, is risk is the possibility that bad or good things may happen. Risk management is thus managing so as to maximize the probability and magnitude of good risk, while also simultaneously managing so as to minimize the probability and severity of bad risk.
Right.
So that's kind of my very simplistic view. And that I believe deals well with not only for profit, but not for profit and also service organizations. And also, to be quite frank, uh, uh, it, I believe that it's not the dumbest idea to have enterprise risk management for the individual.
Oh, what do you mean
So,
by that? For the individual?
uh, well, um, uh, a former professor at Dow who is, my very dear friend, Sonny Marsh and I, Dr. Marsh unfortunately passed away much too young, but we were working on a project of utilizing the best practices of business for personal management.
Ah, okay.
So, kind of a lot of the U Inc. type stuff.
Yeah.
And, part of that was risk management, enterprise risk management. So, as an individual, if you have goals and objectives, uh, you can use a lot of the techniques of enterprise risk management to help you achieve those goals and objectives.
Yeah. 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 Very true. I mean, the one area of enterprise risk management that I always enjoyed, that I think speaks to this, individual using it as an individual as well, was emerging risks. It always fell between the cracks because none of the risk specialist teams really focused on emerging risks, right? They focus on what risks we have today. So it was always the job of enterprise risk teams that I've been part of to sort of, speak to economics, go out there and do some research and bring back what are those big things that we're missing, right? That could actually impact us, which is, arguably a good thing to do as an individual, right? I'm thinking of like AI and what impact that could have on our careers. That's an emerging risk for sure. Um, yeah, so the challenge you're facing, Rick, if we get back to kind of where we started, you've got to put 12 weeks of content, probably more, into a 6-week course. How are you going to do that? What are the most critical elements to an enterprise risk
Yeah.
education, right?
So,
Um,
if you had such a limited amount of time, what topics would you include to get someone started on enterprise risk management?
there's two things that come to my mind. One might be too high level, and I think we speak about it a lot, but I'll mention it in a second. And one is in the weeds, maybe not suited to a 6-week course. But those are the first two things that came to my mind.
Go for
Um,
it.
okay, the first one is communication. The enterprise risk teams that I've worked with have to be expert communicators. They first of all they need a bit of technical expertise to understand what the heck the credit people are talking about and the market risk people with their VAR models. You kind of need to know enough to speak their language and interpret that for your audience who are senior management. If you don't do that, it's not going to be useful to senior management, which means they can ignore you, right? It's not all their fault. The communication, how that is relayed to them, is very important. So we speak about that almost every podcast. I'm not going to get further into it unless you want to touch on something there, Rick. The second thing I experienced, and remember, I was not a senior enterprise risk person. I was in the trenches doing the actual work that needed to be done to make this work, okay, which I enjoy. I was asked to work with the operational teams and the risk specialist teams to come up with metrics that are important, right? Like metrics that should be in our risk appetite statement, right? That we should use to steer the organization. Um, that was impossibly difficult, because a lot of times executives would be involved because these are things they own, they impact their business, and they would want to fudge things. So they would give me a metric, and I would agree with them, and who's going to provide it, and what timeline, blah blah blah. And then it gets to time, and the metric doesn't look so good. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, we've changed the scope of this metric. We're gonna focus it on here. And it was so hard to pin people down on this stuff. And if you don't do that, again, you can be ignored because you're taking a metric that's always changing to senior management. And so, anybody who's ever in that position in the future, it's a very difficult task. It's something you need a lot of, I think, backing from your manager to do properly, some authority behind you, but really nailing down like what are the metrics we're going to focus on? Why are we going to focus on them? And having the scope clearly set that this is what we're looking at. We need it at this point in the month or year, consistently. It's almost a data management problem, really, but there cannot be flexibility for fudging the scope of metrics. It was a very tough challenge.
My experience with that is slightly different. First off, I think it's absolutely key. And the first lecture, as I currently have it planned, is on the importance of objective-based risk management. The issues that you're describing, first off, are absolutely key on the metrics. Uh, in my experience, the majority of the issue with the metrics are first off the usual ones with any metrics, in that um, the metrics are awesome if they're telling the story that you want to hear, and not so awesome if they're not telling the story. Um, and those, of course, are just plain organizational politics, organizational power plays, organizational self-esteem issues
Mhm.
of individuals and groups, uh, which a risk manager can only manage, anticipate, and manage, not really fix.
Yeah.
However, a big issue that I think is the majority of the time is people really don't have a clear idea of what risk management is to do. Back when I was doing risk management consulting, we'd be brought in to set up a risk management strategy.
Mhm.
And the first question I'd ask is, why are you doing risk management? And the answers that you got were incredibly superficial. Um, Everyone's doing it. We heard it add value. Regulator wants it. Uh, Board member wants it.
Yeah.
I had this nursing home once, a chain of nursing homes. And by the way, these were nonprofit nursing homes who on their board had a senior bank executive
Okay.
who basically wanted them to calculate a dollar value at risk, not for the P&L of the nursing home, but for their care. And basically, they were to put a dollar value on someone dying in a given year and calculate the value at risk on that.
Huh,
And,
okay.
given the directives of the board member, who I'm sure was very well meaning, well, it's obvious that they had no freaking clue what risk management was. They also had no freaking clue what value at risk was, but they knew from their board meetings at the bank that value at risk was an important risk management number. So they wanted a risk management number for this nursing home organization. It was just asinine.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm a big believer in objective-based risk management, as I said a few minutes ago. And you can't be objective-based risk management until you can clearly define what is the purpose of risk management. Uh, uh, why are we doing risk management? And,
Mhm.
of course, I can come up with a thousand reasons for why to do risk management. Ironically, I can also come up with at least 500 reasons for why you may not want to do risk management.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, because I would almost think the answer is we're already doing it, right? I mean, any business does risk management. You're not yeah, you're not just jumping at every risk you see. It's just you should hopefully want to do it better in a more informed way and
Yeah.
know what risks you're taking too.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is risk management is just management.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, full stop. If you're truly managing, you are doing risk management. And there's an argument to be made that if you have competent people in your organization, you don't need risk management.
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
you just need cells of risk management to do some perhaps technical analysis or free thinking analysis
Yeah.
to free up the executives to manage the day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Rick, maybe we should also touch on sort of quantitative versus qualitative here. You know, like I've worked mostly in more financial organizations, and like you mentioned about that bank board member, we think everything can be quantified, right? You've got to put a number on it, unless if you want to do something about it. It's not always the case, right? One tricky example again from banks is operational risk. It's notoriously difficult to put a number around it. And for that reason, it's sort of more of a qualitative metric that, banks often put a number around based on experience or, expert opinion. Like, how are you going to approach that with your class? That's sort of that balance.
Well, first off, I have to give you some context for this. Back when I did my MBA, back when before we had paved streets and uh, before cars were a thing and we all had a horse and buggy and whatnot. I remember putting up my hand in a class, I'm quite sure it was organizational behavior, and saying at that time, again, remembering I was a physicist, uh, I can quantify anything. And basically, anything that can't be quantified probably is not worth looking at.
Right.
And I say that even to this day is probably one of the dumbest things I've said. And people who know me realize that I say a lot of really freaking dumb things. I'm kind of a dumb thing, production machine. So that was one of my dumbest things. I'm obviously planning a one of the six uh, sessions on quantitative issues.
Hmm.
Uh, I take a little bit of a different view on quantitative issues. Obviously, my thinking about complicated versus complexity
Hmm.
plays a key role there. If it's complicated, yeah, throw the math at it like crazy, throw the numbers at it like crazy, do the data analysis like crazy. But my opinion is that most really important and most high value risk questions, particularly in ERM context, are complex. And so, if you've ever been to any of my either complexity and or risk presentations, you know that near the end, I almost always finish with my reworking of the Serenity Prayer. And apologies to Nibor, but the Serenity Prayer being obviously God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, serenity to accept the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
Well, I flip that around. God grant me uh, the courage to calculate the things I can uh, I totally butchered it. I totally butchered it. God grant me the courage to calculate the things I can, uh, uh, to not calculate the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. I butchered it. I've said that no matter how many times, but our podcast audience is making me so nervous. I've said this at easily 200 conferences with several thousand people, and here I goof it in front of my podcast audience. See, see, see,
Oh,
see how seriously and how worked up I get about our podcast.
hey, but we take it seriously. No, there's no doubt.
But the whole point is in risk management is you have to learn what you can and should calculate and what you can't and should not calculate.
That's that is very sage advice because we do think in risk. We have to give answers to things. We have to answer all these questions. We have to fill in the gaps that that are left to us, right? The things that can go wrong, and a lot of times it's
And
saying,
or it can
listen,
go extra right,
huh?
or that can go extra right.
True, very true, yeah. But yeah, I don't hear that response enough. That listen, we don't know. We will know when X happens. Yeah,
Actually, you might never know.
you might never know exactly. Yeah, yeah. Humility. That's a valuable skill for a risk manager.
Actually, one of the key themes that I put in is A, humility, B, the value of questions over answers, and
Yeah,
three is empathy. Empathy, and four is sociological imagination. I truly
yeah,
believe that those are the four key qualities of a risk manager. And I'd also put, going back to your first point, communication. Um,
yeah,
I'd push a little bit farther. I'd push marketing ability.
yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, but those are the five key qualities of a risk leader to me.
yeah. No, I would agree with that. Yeah. Okay, Rick. Well, you'll have to report back and tell us how the course progresses. I'm sure we'll.
Actually, I'd love if any of our listeners have any opinions. I would love to hear their opinions
Yeah,
on what should go into um, uh, this 6 week course, the
that would be
six
interesting.
six module course.
Yeah. What would you want to walk away from an enterprise risk management course knowing? That'd be good to know. Yeah. Tell us, folks. Well, until next time, Rick, it's been good. Chat
Have
soon.
fun, everyone.